everybody, I'm back with another video, and today we're going to talk about my September reads. And I did complete my TBR, but I will say I had sort of a disappointing reading month, but I did still read some really good books, so let's just talk about them. The first one is Anne of Avonlea, which is probably one of my favorites out of the whole month. I love the Anne of Green Gables movies. I loved Anne of Green Gables. And Anne of Avonlea was just so sweet. It sort of follows Anne's journey as she becomes a teacher and she steps into the role as teacher, as well as I loved the friendship between her and Mrs. Lavender. I loved Mrs. Lavender and Charlotta the Fourth. That was one of my favorite parts of this book, but this book is just so cozy and sweet, and Anne is one of my favorite protagonists ever. I think if we were all a little more like Anne, we would all be a lot more happy, but I just loved this book so much, and I can't wait to read the third. For some weird reason, instead of having Anne of the Island, which is the third book, we have Anne's House of Dreams, which is, I believe, the fifth book. I don't know why they did that, but I'm gonna have to wait to read the third one. But I just loved Anne of Avonlea, and I highly recommend that whole series. Then we have Lady Susan by Jane Austen. This book was really good. I feel like we sort of were shown a more witty side of Jane Austen's writing in this shorter story, because this story is all set in letters between characters, and the main star of this book is, of course, Lady Susan. Recently widowed, she is witty, she's a little flirtatious and seductive, but she is great. This book had me laughing out loud. I loved her letters to Mrs. Johnson, her best friend, about her daughter. She was super mean, but it was like really funny. But this book was so good, and like I said, we got more of that humorous side of Jane Austen's writing opposed to her larger novels. So I think if you want to start reading Jane Austen, this is a good place to start, because I really did love reading this. I love Lady Susan. She's iconic to me. Then my biggest disappointment of this month, which I'm really sad about, is Athos by Isaac Yorks. So I will start with the good things that I liked about this book, because I loved the world building. The world building was so cool. So all of this takes place on floating islands, and the floating islands are in the valley, and the valley is surrounded by clouds, and no one has ever gotten outside of the valley before. And I just love the floating island aspect of it, and the different cultures of this world were so cool. There was this one culture, they had like lady assassins that were really fun, and I loved how the trade winds would like blow the islands past each other, and then they would anchor on and trade with each other. It was really cool, the world building was, and I liked this one aspect of the plot that we had going on that involved flashbacks, and he really wove it together well. Like, he wove the plot and all the different parts together well. But unfortunately, I did have some problems with this book. The first one is the swearing. There was quite a lot of it, like some more lighter swear words, but throughout the whole book. And then there were, I believe, around 14 or 13 F words throughout this book, which isn't something I love having in my books. But that wasn't the only problem, because there was also a spice scene. It wasn't like super graphic or anything, but it was still a spice scene nonetheless. As well as there was some very heavy, disturbing content, like topics in this book that I didn't know about going into it, which I kind of wish I had known about. So I'm going to put a list of things that are sensitive over here for you guys in case you do pick this up, just so you know everything that might be triggering or sensitive going into this book, because I don't think I can say some of them like out loud on a YouTube video. So I will put a list here just so you are completely informed of what's in this book. But I'm really sad about it. I really hoped I would love this book, because the second book comes out in November, and I was like, oh, a fun new epic fantasy series with really cool world building and plot. And I just love this book. It's so pretty. It's so well designed. I feel like I didn't really give you the plot, so let me do that. So, like I said, they are stuck in the valley, and the reason they're stuck in the valley is because the dragons, like, caged humanity in the valley and didn't let them leave, but the dragons died off. And so now we follow Enzo, and Enzo's foster dad has been in prison for being a heretic because he claimed like there was space outside of the valley. And so Ed Snow is going on this expedition to try and get out of the valley and prove there's other life. Oh, wait, no. The wrong thing. Was called a heretic because he said Athos is a globe, whereas they believed it was just flat forever and you could just keep going. So Ed Snow is going on this expedition to prove that Athos is a globe and get his foster dad out of jail and save him from potential execution. And I did like Ed Snow and his character development because Ed Snow is an invalid, and in this society they treat invalid people really awfully. And so I did really like his character development as he sort of started to believe more in himself, because he was he didn't have a lot of self-confidence. He was very hard on himself. But there were just some things in this book that I really didn't love. So I don't think I won't be reading the second one. And I don't think I should keep this because, like, I told my mom that the books on my shelves have to earn rent by being a story that I think about, by being a story that I really loved reading, or something that I think I'll reread. And I just don't think I'll ever reread this book again, so I unfortunately think I will be donating it. I'm really sad. I really wanted to like this book. That was the biggest disappointment of this whole month. Then I needed a little bit of a pick-me-up, and so I picked up Little Lord Fauntleroy by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This book was so just cute and sweet. So this follows Cedric Fauntleroy. Well, his last name isn't Fauntleroy in the beginning. Cedric Errol. So Cedric's father was actually, his dad was an earl, but he was the youngest son, so it wasn't likely he was going to inherit anything because he had older brothers. And his father fell in love with an American woman, and they ended up getting married. Well, this did not please his father, so his father cut him off from everything. So Cedric's father moved to America, and they raised their child, the main character of this story, who is also Cedric, so that might be a little confusing. But I'll just call him Ceddy, because that's what they call him. But unfortunately, Ceddy's father dies, and so it's just him and his mom. And Cedric, or Ceddy, is such a cute character. He's so sweet and just innocent and so inquisitive about people. I loved his friends, Mr. Hobbs and Dick. Dick was a newspaper shoe shiner, Mr. Hobbs owned the grocery store, and their friendships were so cute. But one day, this man from England shows up and tells Cedric that the Earl's other sons have all died, and so now he technically is the only person who can inherit the estates of the Earl, and now he is Little Lord Fauntleroy. And the Earl is not a very pleasant person. He's very grumpy and sort of mean sometimes and belligerent, but Little Lord Fauntleroy thinks the world of him because he hasn't heard anything bad about him, because his mom didn't tell him anything bad about his grandfather because she wanted him to love him. And seeing how Little Lord Fauntleroy changed the Earl and his relationships and how he affected the community that lived on the estates was so sweet. He's just such a cute little character, and I love Frances Hodgson Burnett's books. They're really good. I've loved all of them. If I see her books at a thrift store, she's an automatic buy for me. But this book was so cute. I feel like I've never even heard of this book. So definitely go pick it up and read it. Then we have one that at first I contemplating not even finishing, but after I got into it, it was so good. And this is a genre I don't normally read, but that is The First Ladies by Maria Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. So this is a story about the friendship of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and civil activist Mary McLeod Bethune. Their relationship was just so incredible, and they were both so strong in how they fought and had to overcome all this bigotry and prejudice, and they fought so hard for civil rights, and their friendship literally changed America. I mean, this book was so incredibly inspiring, seeing how hard these women fought, how Mrs. Bethune started her college off of only $2, and they were so incredible. they were such incredible women who fought so hard in a time period that women and colored people were greatly underprivileged and underserved, and how hard they fought to change that and to change how racist our country was at that time. It was a very good read. I almost gave up on it because it is a dual point of view in the first person, and it was a little repetitive at the beginning because of we would get the same event from the different points of views, but we kept going over the same event over and over again because it was different point of views but the same thing. But we started moving pretty quickly after the first 50 pages, so I think this book is of something that you should read. I think it was really good, and even if you don't read this book, I think just looking into their incredible relationships and the lives that they led is something that I would recommend doing, because they were just such incredible people and fought so hard against in a time that was so rigid in its social structure. So that was a really eye-opening read for me, and I felt like I learned a lot from it. So I'm very glad that I read that, and I want to try and read something more like this, maybe more of a nonfiction side to it, because I sometimes when we were in conversations with them, it felt a little funny, as well as some of the events. The authors in the back talked about how the timeline got a little fuzzy, like when they were doing research. So I think maybe I will try and find a nonfiction book, but on the same topic. I think that would be really good. But the next book I read was Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. So I had started Oliver Twist a long time ago, and then I put it down just because I got distracted. But this book was really, like, honestly a good time reading it. So we follow Oliver Twist, who is born into a workhouse. That's his assigned name. They assign last names if the child doesn't have one. And the workhouse is, the people in charge are awful and extremely mean and cruel to the poor work people who live there. And Oliver Twist, he's unique among the children born in there because he has such a resilient spirit and such a kind spirit, whereas the other kids obviously are hardened and a little traumatized by the events of living in the workhouse. But this story follows Oliver Twist as he tries to escape the workhouse, and he ends up running away to London, where he falls in with a not so favorable crowd. Mr. Fagin is a runner of like a thievery ring, and some of his top thieves are the Artful Dodger, Jack Dawson, those are the same people, and Master Charles Bates, and they try and teach Oliver to steal. But Oliver he has a very strong moral code. He does not want to steal at all. He totally thinks it's wrong, and through events he ends up in all these different scenarios. And I'm trying not to spoil it. It's kind of hard to like give this story premise without spoiling, just because the story is sort of vague. The plot's kind of very windy in this story. But I loved Oliver Twist, and I hated how everyone was so mean to him. But the setting, in the London setting, was very like moody and damp and dark, and it was a little scary at sometimes. But I did really like Charles Dickens' writing overall, so I'm glad I liked his writing because I have more of his books right here. Right here. I have A Christmas Carol, Great Expectations, and A Tale of Two Cities, so I'm glad I liked his writing. But he also sort of had like this satirical tone to his writing, just on society and the elite class, which was very like interesting to catch little snippets of that throughout the story. But I really liked Oliver Twist. The ending was good. I liked the ending. Next we have a book that I'm very proud I read. That's The Star Dive by Philip Hills. So this is all about the Stirling engine, invented by Scotland pastor / Kirk, and how he in 1816 patented, that's not how you say that, a design for an engine. And this is the beginning of the Stirling engine. just an engine that runs on heat and would greatly reduce the need of burning fuel and coal, and so it's more of a cleaner engine to produce work and energy. And it follows the Stirling engine as it evolves and is used throughout the centuries, and it eventually is how it is incorporated into the Krusty design at NASA, the power reactor using Stirling technology. So what Krusty stands for. But it followed all of the different inventors who took this engine and changed it and bettered it and used it in their inventions, and how it eventually led up to it being used in NASA. We learned about John Ericsson's use of the engine in his boats, George Cayley's use of the engine in almost inventing an airplane. This was such an interesting read, but I will be the first to tell you guys that I am not very smart when it comes to mathematics, mechanical engineering. So when we were talking about how the engine worked, I was a little lost because that is not where I'm smart. That's not an area that I know very well, but it was still so interesting how this engine that's over 200 years old is patented by this Scotland Kirk, which is a pastor, eventually led up to being used in all these incredible inventions and eventually being used in space travel. So this was a very informative read. It made me, like, even though I was a little lost, it was super interesting and I wanted to just keep going and reading. I am a sucker for this cover. I love this cover so much, as well as the back. I love this whole book. But this book was very interesting. Here is Mr. Robert Stirling himself, Dr. Robert Stirling himself. And there are some more pictures, so I will show you guys. This is George Cayley's glider that was almost very close to being the first invented aeroplane. Then we've got Eric Hessen's, I don't know why I keep calling him that, John Ericsson's his caloric powered, or they thought it was, the caloric ship up here. We've got a fan, all the different inventions this engine was used in. But this was very interesting. I do really love books that talk about more medieval stuff and older inventions. So this was very fun for me to read. I felt like it opened a door into a new universe of reading, which is nonfiction. And we have a book that is a bit of a hard read, but I think is a very important piece of American history, and that is The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. This is the autobiography by Frederick Douglass about his life and his escape from slavery and into freedom. And Frederick Douglass was an abolitionist, and he's a very important figure in that whole movement, and he inspired so many people. And this story was hard to read just because it truly shows how awful slavery was and how cruel and horrific it was, and just how the moral depravity the slave masters had to be able to do this to another human being. It was hard to read in that aspect, but it was something that I think everyone should read just because it is so important to American history, because this book really did open up people's eyes in that era to how awful slavery was, to a point that they couldn't like justify it anymore, even though they would try to. But Frederick Douglass truly was such an awe-inspiring person, how he remained so steadfast in his faith even after having been through these awful things. And he writes so eloquently, and the way he relates his story is so well written. So even though this was a hard read, I think it's a very important one, and I think everyone should read it, and I'm glad I did read it. And I think this is something that I will definitely come back to, because it's something that we just need to be reminded of, that this is how low humanity will sink if we do not better ourselves. And then next I read some poetry, because I needed something a little bit lighter after the last one, but that is Edgar Allan's poetry, which isn't technically lighter because it is more horror gothic, but I do really love Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. My favorite poem is the iconic The Raven. I love Annabelle Lee as well. And I'm not gonna lie, I loved this one poem, but I forgot the name of it. I think it was called The Haunted Palace. But his poetry is so evoking and atmospheric. It's really such an it really sparks your imagination, and it's such a good time while reading it. So I love Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. I'm gonna try and get into his novels, although I hear they lean more to the horror side, and that's not really something I read, so we'll see. And we've got this book. I actually did not finish this book because, let me just give you the overall plot as far as I am aware of it, because I didn't get very far in this book. But This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald follows Amory Blaine, and his mother is very eccentric and a little wild, and she travels all over, but Amory Blaine, his appendix bursts, I'm pretty sure. Is that what was happened? Anyways, he gets sent back to America, and he ends up going to school, and then he wants to go to college. And it's not that I didn't like this book. I honestly just didn't care at all I didn't care about the characters. And the writing, I didn't like the writing at all. His sentences there were times when they would be so long and we would get lost in the middle of the sentence, and I didn't even remember what the topic was when we started out, as well as we would go on these long rants and paragraphs about stuff that didn't really seem important. I'm sorry if you love F. Scott Fitzgerald and this book in particular, but I just simply do not. And I will be donating this along with AFOs, unfortunately. And yeah, because this book is pretty popular, I could probably just borrow it from the library, but I really don't. I did not care for it at all. I really couldn't care less, actually. Then we have what I picked up in lieu of me not finishing This Side of Paradise, and that is volume 1 of the New Junior Classics. This is the Fairy Tales and Fables. All of the covers of these are the same. It's really the spines that are different, and this one's got a little nose on a mushroom. But this was really cool because it had fairy tales from all around the world. We had fairy tales from England, Ireland, Norway, Germany, Russia, Japan, India, and these books are so old, like the printing is, that, well, they're not super old, but there's tales from Czechoslovakia, which is no longer a country, and I really loved seeing all the different fairy tales from around the world. I think my favorite out of them all was The Tongue-Cut Sparrow by, who was it by? It was one of them from Japan, and it was by Yae Theodora Osaki. And The Tongue-Cut Sparrow was one of my favorite, with the little fairy sparrows and the house in the bamboo forest. It was really, really cute. But you can't really give plots on fairy tales, they're so short. I did not read the ones from France because I do have a collection of French fairy tales, so I'd already read all the ones in here. But I loved seeing all the different fairy tales from all the different cultures. But that is my reading month. We had lots of variety. We had a biography, poetry, nonfiction, fantasy, classics. I mean, I had a really good reading month despite my disappointments, but my favorite is probably Anne of Avonlea or Lady Susan. It's kind of hard to pick. But that is my September reading month. I hope you guys all had a great reading month and found some new favorites. And I will see you again soon, and goodbye.